right. Hello, everyone. How we doing? Yeah, you guys get lunch? All sleepy? Good. Fantastic. Hello, my name is Mike Geig. Today we're going to be talking about extending the editor with UI elements. Quick show of hands, who here writes editor tools, writes editor window scripts, custom inspectors, all that cool stuff? Fantastic. So we're going to look at some really cool stuff today. So we say this thing, extending the editor with UI elements and whatnot, and you may know what that means, you may not. You maybe just like the letters U and I and decided to show up anyway. So we have this thing right now called GUI. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but our current editor code is written with this thing called GUI, which stands for Intermediate Mode, Graphical User Interface. And we have this new thing that's in the engine. I don't know if anyone's seen it. Anyone here tried anything with UI elements? Raise your hand if anyone's tried it out. Cool, awesome. So it's been in a little while, and we keep adding stuff to it. And UI Elements is sort of this new way of building UI that takes advantage of some really cool stuff and mitigates some of the issues with GUI. So when we're talking about GUI, like I said before, we're talking about immediate mode, right? And so basically this editor UI is drawn every frame, whether it needs it or not, and it could be process intensive or whatever, but we just basically, it just keeps refreshing. You may have seen this on inspector GUI or whatever methods in your code where you're just constantly drawing and drawing and drawing and stuff like that. One of the things that's sort of specific about it, and it could be a good thing, can be a bad thing, whatever, is that all of the functionality, layout, and style is all kind of together, right? You say you want a label right here, and you put style right there, and what does the button do right here? And while that's cool because everything is nice and together and whatever, it can make it very difficult to separate out and update and reuse and things like that because everything is just sort of mashed together. So if I'm looking at a piece of GUI code right here, I can see that in one section of GUI code, I have layout and style, and then actually a little bit more layout that I didn't call out there, and then some functionality all smushed together. And whenever you need to change something to make something a different color or a different size or whatever, it can be difficult to figure out exactly where that thing is, and you find yourself searching a lot and scrolling a lot and whatever. So what we're talking about with UI Elements then is a new way of approaching this. All right. So one, UI Elements is only going to render when something needs to be rendered, when something needs to be updated. Right. So that's going to make it a lot more efficient in your editor. We're also looking at something called separation of concerns, right? So we're going to separate out the style from the functionality from the layout. Right? That does mean that for every window, we're going to have 3 different files that are going to control some different things, but then finding stuff becomes very easy. Stuff becomes very easy to reuse and applied in a bunch of different cool ways, which we're actually going to take a look at. We're also introducing 2 new file types. The first type is called a .uss file, which is actually just a subset of CSS. So if you've used CSS, this is going to be just right on par with what you're used to. And the other is UXML, which again is just a subset of XML. And we're going to be using that for styling and for layouts. So I'm going to go hop right in here. I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint, so let's just hop right into the Unity editor. And I have a scene here that's, this, whatever. I just needed a backdrop, so there's a scene. And I have this game object called props. There's nothing on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at creating some custom inspectors using UI elements. Now, I'm going to create custom inspectors, but they don't have to be custom inspectors. You can use UI elements for editor windows and whatever else you want to make. But I'm going to be using it for these custom inspectors. Also, I'm going to go ahead and just quit Slack because that being orange is just going to drive me absolutely insane. So there we go. So what I have here is I have this script. It's called Hello World. It doesn't do anything. It's completely empty. I'm just going to create a custom inspector for this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my editor folder, and I'm going to see that I have this script, Hello World Editor. I'm going to open it up. Now, I have a bit of code I want to look at, so I'm not going to type it all out. So I just have some stuff, but I want to talk about some of the highlights here. So the first is I'm going to say at the top here using unityengine.uielements. I didn't have to install any special package or anything. And just like a normal custom inspector, we have custom editor type of hello world. That's the same as GUI. And we could see we're inheriting from editor. And then I have this, hello world script, game object, whatever. And this new thing, this visual element root, right? So everything with UI elements are these visual elements that we can nest and build hierarchies out of and do some really cool stuff with to form these layouts. And I have one here that's just going to be sort of the root container of this UI for myself here. Now, I have this public void on enable. So it's kind of like where I can do some initialization whenever we need to start this bad boy up. And this is, again, straight from UI elements. We actually don't even need this. My hello world doesn't do anything. But I wanted to show you that it's the exact same as UI elements, where I can say, hey, just give me whatever I'm an inspector for so I can call some code on it. We're going to have an example where it actually does something here shortly. And then I'm also going to say, you know what, let's just instantiate or prepare this, this visual element. Right? So nothing too spectacular, nothing too mind-blowing there. Now, I'm going to go down into this method here, create inspector GUI, which is very similar to IAmGUI's on, what is it now? On inspector GUI, I believe is what it's called. This is just create inspector GUI. And what I'm going to say first off is root.clear, just in case my root visual element had something in it, I'm reusing it or whatever. I'm just going to clear it out because I'm about to draw the UI for whatever thing it is that I'm creating an inspector for. And so what I can do here is I can create just a label. So label, my label, some label, equals new label. And I'm going to say the text of that label is hello world. And I can add that directly to my root. So I've created a label, and I'm going to put it in my root. I could stack up a bunch of things, add them to my root. And then this is just going to return root back out so that the engine can build the whole UI structure and whatever. Now, this is a very simple example, but let's see what this does. So I'm going to come back to Unity here. And I'm going to go to this props game object. And I'm just going to drag my hello world component on here, script. And I see, quite deliciously, hello world. Fantastic. And, as I had said, we can do weird things, like I can add label twice or whatever. I assume that works. I've never actually tried it. Please work. I just guessed. You can add a bunch of other things that way, so I assumed it would work this way. So no, maybe just one label. All right. That's what I get for ad-libbing, right? You probably have to create a second one. I'm going to show you when that will work later that made me believe this one will work, so sorry about that. But, so let's look at something else here. So I have this text, hello world. Let's say I want to change the style of it. So if I'm really used to IAmGUI and I'm used to the way we work in IAmGUI, I could come here and I could say, all right, well, let's also add some style to this, and I could do some like CSS style code here. So I'm going to have some style, and I'm going to say maybe like font size equals like 20, and then I want to also do like say Unity font style and weight is going to equal font style. There we go, dot bold, like that, something akin to this. And when I come back to Unity here, my hello world, assuming I didn't do anything dumb, there we go, hello world, 20-point font and bold. Cool. So a lot of that is very similar to IAmGUI. But this really does have that same problem of my layout and my style, my functionality is all in the same place. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to extend this to do some cooler stuff. But worst case scenario, if you're really in love with the way IAmGUI structure stuff, you can do something very, very similar and still use UI elements, right? You can put it all together if you really, really want to. I don't. So we're going to do something a little bit different. So here inside my project, I also have a folder here where I have some styles and layouts. And one of my styles is this Hello World Styles. So if I open this up, what I see is I have this USS file, so hello world styles.uss, and then, again, it's just a strict subset of CSS. And I have some styling information here. And then I also have this, under my layouts, this hello world layout, which, again, is a UXML. Again, a subset of XML. So I can see here, I've defined a visual element. That's a label. And the text is hello world expanded, right? So next level hello world. And now, if I go to my hello world expanded editor, I can see it's a little bit different. So again, UI elements, custom editor, here's my hello world. There's my root. But I also have this new thing, a visual tree asset, which is going to be for my layout, and a style sheet, right? Inside on enable, so I'm doing the hello world just like before. But now I'm going to say, hey, style sheet, let's load an asset. Let's load a style sheet. And here's my hello world styles, right? And also, let's load a visual tree asset for my layout. Okay, so I'm just loading these files up. I'm creating my root element like before, but now I'm saying, hey, root, give yourself a style sheet of this so that anything we add to the root that matches the styling classes or whatever of our style sheet will just automatically be applied. The cool thing about this is I can swap out style sheets, add style sheets, do a bunch of cool stuff there. Now, inside my create inspector GUI, all I need to do is say root.clear, again, just to clear things out. And then I'm going to say tree, this is my visual tree asset here, clone your layout into root, and then return. Now, just by doing that, check this out. So I'm going to come over here to props. I'm going to remove this hello world script here, and I'm going to add my hello world expanded script. And now we get the same thing. Well, it says hello world expanded, and it's following my style sheet, which is going to be this red with the larger font there. So I can control everything, and I can separate stuff out. Now you might be thinking, well, that's three different files to just create some red text. That's kind of lame. I completely agree. So let's do something maybe a little bit better. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some new style stuff. Right. So here I'm saying that any label that I create in my UI is going to be 20-point font in red. So however many labels I create, 20-point font and red. Right. So here's something else I can do. I'm going to create a class in CSS called row, just like this. So I'm just going to say things that have rows. By the way, I am not an expert in CSS. If that's not called a class, I'm sorry. I think it's called a class. He's saying yes, so OK, cool. That's called a class. I'm terrible at CSS, but I'm decent at Unity. So let's see if we can make this work. So I'm going to say, all right, so I'm going to create a flex direction here. So we're going to just say flex direction of my row here. And I'm going to say row is going to be my flex direction. And then I'm going to say justify content. OK, just like this. And I'm going to say center. Now, anything I give the class of row is going to be center justified with a flex of row. So if I go to my layout here, where I can see my label, text, hello world, I can go to my visual element and say, hey, visual element, you are class row. There we go. So now if I come back to Unity without double quotes there, I'm going to see that that is going to be centered once it redraws. There we go. So now we can, again, I can just start making CSS or USS changes, UXML changes, whatever, and it's just going to keep updating whatever. And the cool thing is I can now drop this style sheet on any UI element, and it's going to say, oh, are you a row or a label? Well, let me just give you this stuff, right? Now, let's look at an actual cool example, because right now this is just hello world text, which is kind of boring. So I'm going to look at another thing here. So I have another style here, and this is going to be for a prop spawner. Now you can see I have a lot of stuff in the USS for prop spawner, right? So I have row, which is flex center justified. I have a class for headers, so my headers are going to be this kind of yellowish color with 15-point font. I have a class called prefab buttons that's going to have a height and width and margin and whatnot. But check this out. This one's really cool. So by saying .unity button, I'm talking about any Unity buttons, right? So button, the same as I can say Unity label instead of just label, like this to specify which labels and which buttons, and these are the ones I'm talking about. But I can say here, hey, if you're a button, that's your background image. If I hover my mouse over you, that's your image, and if I activate you, that's your image, right? Using CSS, so I can just swap this stuff out. And for anyone who uses our UI and stuff like that and thinks, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could just make all my buttons look the same? And everyone just goes, what you can't, that'll never happen. That technology does not exist, right? It does, and you can do it now. Just drop a style on it, and boom, they're all the same, which is really, really cool. So we have this really neat stuff here where we can just set up all these different stylings with these sort of different events. And if I look at the layout for this, it looks a little bit more complex, but I can see, all right, so I've got these rows with my label that choose a game object to spawn, class header, so I know what that's going to do. And then I have these visual element rows where I have this button. And here's kind of a neat trick. So I've named the button a file path, because this button is going to be used to spawn a prop. So now I can say, hey, if you click this button, what was the button's name? I bet you there's a prefab at that location. Let's spawn one, right? So the little trick, you don't have to do it that way, but whatever. And it's going to have some icons and some other things and stuff like that. So it's actually really cool. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, I really don't want to type that much UXML, I completely agree. There's going to be a talk a little bit later, tomorrow, all about the new builder and the runtime UI elements and things like that. So definitely check that out. But here I have this layout for all these buttons and things like that. And so I'm going to go to the editor code for my prop spawner. And we're going to look in here, and we're going to see that this code is actually pretty simple. So again, prop spawner, it's an editor for prop spawner. I have a visual element root, a tree, a style sheet. I'm going to load my styles. I'm going to load my tree. I'm going to create my root. I'm going to add my style sheet. All this stuff we just saw. Inside my create inspector GUI, I'm going to clear out my root. I'm going to clone my tree. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a query, because I want to add what do these buttons do, right? So this script here concerns itself with the functionality of my UI. My other script is the layout. My other script is the style. This one is just what do my buttons do? And I could go one by one and say this button does this, and this button does that, and whatever. But since I named the buttons, the prefabs they're going to instantiate, I can just have a query in a list here. So I can say, hey, query for my buttons that have the class name prefab button. Cool. That gives me a list of that. And I'm just going to loop through those and say, hey, button, you're clickable. And when we click you, we're going to say spawner, spawn that prop. That's what the mono behavior does. So spawn whatever prop of the button I just clicked. Cool. Ignore all this other code. We'll come to this in a second. Now, if I come back to Unity here, and I go to my prop, and I drop my prop spawner on here, I'm going to see that I have all these buttons, and I'm going to see the mouse over. The size of these buttons was dictated by my USS. So if I look at that here, I can see my prefab buttons have a height and width of 125 pixels with this margin here. And here it is. And then the images of these buttons are dictated by mouse over, mouse down, and all that stuff. And when I say move my prop spawner here and click canister, click over here, medium crate, whatever, these buttons' names are the prefabs that we want to spawn. Cool. Right? Pretty straightforward stuff, pretty awesome. But there's more we can do with this, all right? So one thing, for instance, that I want to do is I can't tell what this thing is that I'm going to spawn. And I could create some static icons, some PNG images or whatever of what I want to spawn, but I can actually do something much cooler and also use it as a learning opportunity. So that's what I did. So let's say I have a whole bunch of legacy IamGUI code, a whole bunch of editor tools I've already written, and I'm really not looking forward to rewriting those tools. Totally understandable. So what I have is actually such a situation where I have some editor code that is useful for drawing like preview windows of things, and I want to reuse that code. So I'm going to actually Control-Z all that stuff because I don't like clutter. I'm going to come back to here. I'm going to go to my prop spawner editor. And I have a section down here called IamGUI code, where I have IamGUI code, right? So things that were done with IamGUI and whatnot, not super important. But one thing that has been added now is this IamGUI container type. So I have this IamGUI container icon, and inside this icon, I have my original IamGUI code and the code methods those call and things like that. So I'm basically able to nest that inside here for either functionality that UIElements doesn't have yet or code that I've just already written and I don't want to rewrite, right? So inside this create button icon, we just have this IamGUI container named icon that's going to have all this code. It's going to return this back to me. And then here I have this method called add button icon where I give it a button and it's going to say, okay, well, let me grab that IamGUI container and let's just add it to my hierarchy. Cool. Just throw that in there as well. And so if I come back here to where I have button.clickable.clicked, and for each button, since this is in my loop of each button, I'm just going to say, all right, well, let's also add this button icon, passing in the button, and then what's the path of the preview window it should be finding, the asset it wants to look at. I'm just going to say button.name because that was an easy way to have the path. So I'm going to do that. And now I'm going to come back to Unity and let the window redraw itself once that script recompiles. And now I have these images for the things that I want to do. But these aren't images, actually. These are editor windows, right, which is snazzy. So I can see exactly what it is that I'm going to be creating there. And then I can say, all right, medium crate, and what do you think? Is this maybe a ficus? Would we say that's a ficus? Certainly has ficus-like qualities. I just like the word ficus. So there we go. All right. So we can, again, separate our concerns, split things out, right? Easily organize, reuse IamGUI code. But here's the cool thing that caused me to screw up earlier, and I'm going to show you why. So one other thing that's really neat is that, all right, so I can say, load this style, load this tree, I can have different style sheets. If I go to my, my Hello World expanded editor, and I'm going to say, let me grab this line right here. And I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to say, all right, let's do var something equals this. Now I'm grabbing my Hello World layout, and so now I'm just going to do something dot clone, and I'm going to pass in root on that. So now what this enables me to do is it enables me to double up my functionality. So now I can have, I'm going to let that redraw there. I have not only my original tool, but I have my Hello World expanded there as well. And then let's say, just for funsies, that I just want to say tree.clone again. Oop, helps if I spell right. Oh man, you guys, you're supposed to be stopping me from doing this. All right, so I'm going to come back here, and I'll let this redraw once it compiles, and now I can have this tool again. Now, granted, you probably wouldn't want this tool twice, but that means that I can create a bunch of different tools and create custom configurations of editor windows of maybe this window wants one of these tools and two of those tools and half of this tool. That's not possible. One of those tools, whatever. And then this style and that style and that style, mix and match and make your own, right? Not what everyone wants. So a lot of really cool stuff that we can do with this by separating that out. That's why I screwed up earlier, by the way, because I was just like, oh yeah, you can just do a bunch of them at the same time. It'll work just fine. But with Clone Tree, it does actually work. And so that gives us a lot of flexibility there. Okay, so I'm going to just hop back here because I do want to talk about real quick that there is one more session. So if you're interested in checking this out, like a longer session about UI elements and learning about the UI builder and stuff like that, and about how we can use UI elements not only for editor code, but also for runtime, like in our games and stuff like that, then definitely check out the sessions tomorrow, 3 to 3:45. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap up here. I have time for questions. There's folks from the UI elements team here if you have questions for them as well. And if you don't have any questions, thank you all very much for spending your time with me. So thank you very much.